Hello, everybody. Thank you all for your patience out here. Just got back from work. All right, so we are going to basically start in about 5 minutes. So take some time to kind of chill and grab your favorite beverage of choice, and we'll start soon. Okay, so see you all in a little bit. But I guess in the meantime, we can kind of talk a little bit about what's the plan for Saturday. I think there are some questions about whether we get Saturday off because of Memorial Day. We don't, as much as I would have been like, I'll give you all the lessons and y'all do it at home. But honestly, we only have I think like three more Saturdays, so each Saturday is important. And primarily, what we're gonna do, so we're gonna go over some of our, we'll be doing the Node and possibly Express labs. Um, on Saturday in your groups. So, your capstone groups, congregate with your groups and do the labs. And then the remainder of the day is going to be primarily all starting up your capstone project. We are going to be there to kind of like guide you through it, but that's going to be primarily what we'll be doing on Saturdays, and sequential Saturdays will just kind of be doing the same thing until y'all have a really cool, shiny, cool app. Um, Also, one thing I do want to point out is we take a look here. Um, I see that we still only have one other group that basically mentioned who they were in Slack. So, do that. Uh, I'm not your parent out here, so I'm not gonna like keep bothering you about it. But uh, again, you know, the higher ups are watching, so they'll be out here being like, all right, um, there's only two groups out here. Okay, let's start talking to the class. All right, so um, again, what you're gonna do is put your group name. I like team Chuck spot over here. Good stuff. The names of the members, and then basically you click the button of also sending it to all TTPR so everyone can kind of see who's in your group. And then uh, we as instructors know that you're grouped up. Okay. Any questions on that before we start?
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So I sent that message, but the problem is I didn't click the also send to all TTPR. Can I edit that?
Yeah, no. All right, shame on you, John, but like it's fine. Okay? Like you like well we forgive you. But
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, basically you're good there. Don't worry. Hold on one second. Actually, that terrible. I just realized I was charging my computer with the wrong outlet. We've been teaching, and then halfway through my whole Mac shuts down. But yeah, thank you for doing it. It's okay if you didn't check yours, but everyone else, click this button here. Okay, cool. Again, we'll kind of go over like your, like the projects that you're doing, but um, I would say, if you kind of know your project, if you have a general idea of like what you're doing now, it'd be a good idea to kind of mention that inside of kind of like one of the other like channels. So either in your cohort, or actually it would probably be better if we do it in TTPR 2026. So like kind of like everyone can kind of chat about it. But yeah, primarily we want to kind of hear from y'all on just kind of like what you're doing so we can kind of like be like, oh, maybe there are some extra stuff that we learned about from our multiple years in the industry that can possibly help y'all. Um, this lecture today going over Node, you'll kind of see how um, you understanding the right packages to kind of install into your project can kind of save you a whole week to months of work on a project because you're kind of building your project on the backs of giants. The idea is like they're really great developers that made stuff in the past. It's very similar to what I shared with y'all in class last Saturday, but let me just kind of see if I can do this real quick. But TN. Yeah, basically the idea is like, for every kind of thing that you're doing on the node side, there's probably someone that built something similar to Shad CN, but on like backend services. So, you don't have to kind of like reinvent the wheel. I was actually learning about a couple of things with Node recently to just kind of make sure that I'm telling y'all all the most modern stuff. And something that was really funny was kind of like this. Like someone mentioned this, and I was like, "Oh yeah, you're completely right." But um, the path to basically being a senior engineer is kind of like understanding how to like read the docs on things like this, and figuring out how to incorporate them in your project, also understanding how they work. So you basically are able to work fast and work well with things that are kind of currently existing in the world. Um, Very similar to Tailwind CSS over here. You have these really great external elements to kind of build out really cool stuff. And as you can see, a lot of other companies have already built stuff out using this. So, you know, again, I showed you all this like in class, but for those who weren't there, kind of thing, utilizing this for your front end development would be yeah, you would primarily you'd still have to style your page and stuff like that, but a lot of like the skeleton bone structure is set up, and then you just really have to focus on making things the right way, whatever you want, kind of thing. This is how I'm able to kind of accelerate my projects as well really fast. It's kind of utilizing these really cool tools. But yeah, okay, where are we at? Uh, Currently loading. All right, there we are. Beautiful. But yeah, where are we at? Okay. So today we're learning about, I'm kidding. We went over this. But basically our last class we kind of went over this whole concept of like, JSON, practical use of promises here and like external APIs. But there was a reason that I kind of made sure that you guys understood this before we moved into like more backend stuff is because primarily that's what, like what you might be building with Node.js in the future. So let's kind of scroll up. Bam. Yeah. So enough of that. Let's kind of talk about Node.js and how it changed the game. I get, I always try to start with a little bit of an analogy out here, but like picture a world where you guys kind of, you made it big, you made a killer app. It's actually your final project in this class basically, and you get to sell it for like $3 million, and like it's a team of three, so y'all all split at $1 million a pop or something. And then one of y'all decides to like buy a Ferrari, but you're only able to kind of drive it in these little like 15-mile-per-hour roads out here. It's kind of limiting, kind of boring. That's a little heartbreaking almost. It's almost like, a monkey paws curse where you're just kind of like, yes, you got the Ferrari, but you can only drive it in 15-mile-per-hour zones out here. But um that's kind of like the realm of what JavaScript used to be like when it was kind of cursed to the browser. It only could really run and execute code in your Google Chrome or your Firefox or your Microsoft Edge out here or Internet Explorer. But basically, that's not a really great experience. So that's, like picture a world where you had to do that, like, and picture out of nowhere in 2009, someone just kind of opens up the roads and then you can kind of just drive your Ferrari all over the highway, get a bunch of tickets, but at least you get to kind of like push it to its paces. That's basically what kind of happened with JavaScript when Node.js kind of like entered the game out here. So yeah, let's talk about it. All right, so what we're gonna go over, of course, we're gonna have a great little intro, a little bit about Node, the beginnings out here. We are gonna kind of talk about what is Node, why do we use Node, installing Node. All of y'all have basically already installed Node. If you didn't, let's talk about it on Saturday because I don't know how you were doing labs without that or like working with React, but then we'll kind of go into node modules, like spoiler alert, y'all all have been using node modules, node loaders, node packages, and the node package manager, if we have time today. Okay, so, all right, what is this Node.js nonsense? So basically, Node is a platform for building applications. It allows you to kind of like run your JavaScript outside of the browser. So as we kind of talked about before, I was like, oh, like everything we've kind of been building out back in the day has been, our browser here. If my browser would move, 1 second. Right. Let's minimize the screen now. Yeah, hold on. All right. There we go. Sometimes like my browser just locks up for some reason, which is weird. Okay. So, let's think about, like, our little browser over here. This is technically, like we can run JavaScript in here, let, H equal a dork over here. So what is H? He's a dork. All right, basically, we get to kind of enjoy the magic of JavaScript like here, but again, this is very similar to basically being able to like go on a road with like a really powerful programming language like JavaScript and only being able to like use it in like 15 mile per hour roads like the browser. Wouldn't it be a great idea? Wouldn't it be amazing if we can do a little bit more? We can kind of take that same logic that we've learned to build websites and also build desktop applications all the way to back end services. That's what Node.js is really doing. Like that's why Node.js exists. So basically, again, you get to build your Java. You get to use all this JavaScript that you learned from this boot camp and use it both on the browser, on your front end applications, and also your back end services, like building out APIs and building out backends to kind of like save and delete users and stuff like that for your actual app, all through the same JavaScript. So in the past, it was like you had to kind of have like your JavaScript front end, and then basically you had to have like a Python or Django type app to deal with your backend services or Ruby, Java, all that stuff. So Now you learn JavaScript, you can basically utilize it for the front end and back end and a bunch of other things too. We'll go into other things too in a little bit. So we get let's do this first. All right, so again, it's really fast, but the reason for that is a little complicated. We'll kind of go into that, but yeah, let's give a context of by understanding how, why Java, Node.js was created. Um, yeah, kind of gave you all the hints already, but in the beginning, Ryan Dahl basically is the creator of like this Node.js thing. Basically, in 2009, he kind of was really exhausted and unhappy with the constraints of existing like web servers, how and also like how JavaScript can only really be used in the browser. So he basically built the first iteration of kind of like Node.js and then presented that at like the JavaScript conference in 2009. And that just changed the game. Everyone was like, oh my God. So you mean I can like take this JavaScript that I've been using on Internet Explorer and put it on a server? That's amazing. And like, and basically for a while, that was working. And what's interesting, like, this is what happens a lot of times. This is why these new frameworks come out every 2 years, so on and so forth. But like someone believes, or someone's right. Like for example, Node.js is definitely a benefit to the whole world, but someone kind of believes like, hey, like I see a disservice in the world. Basically, um I think something can be done better. I want to do something better, or I want to kind of make basically something that I want to do, or like I find value in, and then basically share it along. And then you realize thousands of other people also like would find value from it. And that's kind of the name of the game with the web and the open source movement and stuff like that. So this is a long-winded way of basically saying, like don't sleep on like the projects and the things that you're trying to do, because it's always the juniors or the seniors that are over here basically in software development that are basically changing the game. It's like the junior developers that are new to the field basically being like, wait, something's done this way? That's stupid. Like, what if we do it this way? And like 90% of the time, the senior developers would basically say like, hey, it's done this way for this reason. And you're like, oh, okay, like maybe I was wrong about it. But for those 10% pieces where you actually kind of like find a solution to something because you're so new to the field and you basically have fresh eyes on this whole multi thing process over here, basically um you are all right, yeah, that was funny. But basically like you have to yeah, you really just think about the fact that like you can basically build something out really really cool. And yeah, and it's always senior developers because they've been building stuff in the world of development for a while. And and then basically like, all right, I'm opinionated and a lazy developer. I think things should be built differently. So um yeah, Node.js, that's kind of like how someone thought they can build something better, and they did. And now we can all kind of write JavaScript anywhere we want. All right, so like the idea is like, there is what's cool about Node.js is it's kind of both blocking and non-blocking. We use non-blocking mostly, but I kind of want to just go over what's the deal with like non-blocking, because this is the amazing part of like Node.js. So think of a world where you are at Shake Shack or something like that. You order a burger, and basically the waiter takes your order, but then just kind of like just starts staring at the kitchen waiting for your burger to be made, and you're kind of just stuck there basically waiting for her. or him or whoever, and basically there's a huge line that kind of starts accumulating, basically waiting for this order to be received. You get your burger, after like basically it's done, you receive it, and then basically you walk away, enjoy your burger, but then there's like 10 other people that were kind of queued up, and basically the same process happens. This is really kind of the concept of blocking. A lot of this is very similar to what we've learned about with like async programming and promises and stuff like that. This is kind of just another way of saying that. So, Node.js non-blocking. So what's kind of beautiful about this is let's take that same analogy over here, and it kind of works like a real Shake Shack now, where basically you order your burger, you get a little like pole with a flag that kind of says number 12 or something like that, and then you can kind of walk away, wait for your food, um understanding that you have this kind of like flag, this emitter. We'll kind of go into that a little later, and then other people can kind of take their orders as well. So let's kind of like, that's the analogy, but let's kind of take it in the real world of like blocking here. So let's say as a client, I'm over here trying to upload a recording of your lessons out here. And, basically it just goes into, I upload the file to the server, and I'm just kind of hung up, just waiting. Hey, what's up? Everything's frozen because we're waiting for this file to upload. And then the second the server pings that it's done, it's like, yo, okay, I'm done. Go back to you can go to the client, and it says like, all right, your video's uploaded. Now with non-blocking, you can be like, yo, I uploaded that same file, and you get like a little timer saying, all right, it should take 2 minutes. And then you can kind of go off, do whatever the hell you want. And then basically you just can kind of ping the server to be like, hey, how's that file upload doing? It's just like, not bad, it's almost done. You can reply, sweet, let me go and watch some more YouTube shorts or something like that while that's happening. Then you get the whole, okay, I'm done. And you could kind of see how like this frees up a lot of like, the browser as well as servers as well as you as a user. So that's really what Node.js is. Node.js is kind of like this open source cross-platform runtime environment that allows developers to run JavaScript outside of the browser. So it's built on like the V8 JavaScript engine, which is basically what is used for building your like whole Google Chrome browser. So it's basically built on top of that, and it provides like server-side execution for like environments for JavaScript. So like where this kind of like helps you to like build out these scalable apps, these high performance apps that are kind of like fully basically a full-fledged backend, and these event-driven non-blocking input output models give you this like really modular, lightweight, efficient way to kind of like import code into your services out here. So again, what is a JavaScript engine? It's like a computer program or like a part of a web browser that really just interprets and executes your JavaScript code. So like it's kind of responsible for basically taking your JavaScript code, parsing it and turning it into machine code so it can kind of talk to the lower levels of your PC. So like it can kind of start talking to your CPU, GPU, and stuff like that. And that gives you the ability to kind of use a lot of cool things that were back in the day only really exclusively for desktop apps or other things that are kind of closer to your computer's processor via JavaScript. So, you know, pretty cool stuff there. Like basically you can build out a whole desktop application that feels very similar. It's not going to feel like a one for one kind of thing, but it feels very similar to a full-fledged, like app that you actually had to install via JavaScript. Like, and here I kind of made this cool analogy before, but like this whole concept of like taking your JavaScript code and turning it into machine code so it can actually talk to your your CPU and stuff like that is kind of how we're able to do really cool stuff like with 3JS. Yes. And kind of like you can see these really cool experiments that are made that run primarily on the web, but like it feels like this whole nother thing. It feels like a whole a whole like software application that like that shouldn't be allowed on the browser. It shouldn't work. I think I was trying to find it was this really cool one. Oh yeah, like this is another really cool one. Let's see if this still works. Um this was in VR. This was so cool, but I like it looks like you're not allowed to use it anymore because we can't launch the experiment. But that was back when Google would actually experiment and you actually had a bunch of they just threw money at cool experiments out here. But yeah, let's take a look at this over here, it takes a little bit more time to load, but as you can see here, you can tap the hold button. Wow, this is actually all right. There we go. Cool. But yeah, this kind of works on the web here, and pretty dope. Like this feels like a full-fledged game, but it's just rolling on your browser out here. You know. All right, let's get out of here before I get distracted. But um, again, there's this guy over here, which if you want to learn 3JS from anybody, like take a look at this guy, take a look at his portfolio, and um, like this is all just kind of something that runs in JavaScript over here. And I was telling the other class, like, hey, if you ever want to like get yourself like recognized, this is how you build a resume. This is how you build your website out here. So, you drive to the link and you just hit enter. It takes you to your site. Yeah, it's pretty cool when you really think about it. And also, you know how like every influencer on Instagram is out here being like, buy my $400 course. I would buy this dude's course because like seeing this portfolio over here, I'm like, I want to make that. I want to learn how to do this. Like, I want to get hired instantly, basically by making a really cool like site out here. So long-winded way of saying like don't be these like YouTubers out here just I mean these influencers on Instagram out here like being like like I'm gonna just say a bunch of stuff on the camera and then basically sell a course. You show the world what the hell you can do with code and then then people will be like, yo, oh my god, teach me. And then you can be like, all right, if you want to teach, if I'm going to teach you, I have to charge, kind of thing. But like, long story short, um, all the world is sales. That's how you sell yourself. Whether you're getting a job, you're making your own stuff, and all of that is really powered by this whole concept of kind of like take your JS code, bringing it to machine code, so it can kind of like work on your actual like computers, like CPU, GPU, and stuff like that. And actually, you're able to make these really cool, rich, engaging experiences. So um, basically, JavaScript runtime. Let's kind of go over this again a little bit more. So, like the runtime environment provides like this infrastructure where you can kind of execute JavaScript code. Uh, like these pieces and like set libraries kind of support like other functionalities. So what's cool about this is like this JavaScript runtime environment is what kind of powers like web browsers. It's what powers Node.js, but also like it also powers like mobile application framework. So when we talk about how like React kind of brought up the fact that you kind of learn React and you can kind of utilize this supplemental library within like a sister technology of like React called React Native. And then you can kind of build out, like iOS and Android apps, desktop apps, all the way to browsers, browser websites. This is kind of like an example of like talking about here. So ultimately, it really just abstracts away like, the underlying hardware and the operating system details. So you can kind of just write JavaScript and it talks to those lower level pieces so you can do like really cool special things. Like for example, like using your camera on a web browser is kind of an example of just being like, hey, that usually was reserved for like a desktop app or a iOS or Android app where you can kind of utilize your phone or your actual camera here. That's why a lot of times people have to install the app of Zoom over basically just using it in the browser. But yeah, like this is kind of like you know what we mean by like abstracting these extracting away like the underlying hardware and operating system stuff so you can kind of just straight up write JavaScript and do the same thing. All right, so let's kind of talk a little bit about Google Chrome versus Node.js. Chrome, the browser, is a client-side JavaScript runtime. So it's part of the browser. It's part of the browser that most of y'all are on. And it kind of handles things like rendering your website, executing JavaScript within that 15 mile per hour lane that I was kind of joking about, where you're kind of limited to the client side browser, while Node.js is kind of server side. You write that same code, you can kind of like write to servers, you can kind of create your backend services. It's installed over like a computer or a server. So like let's say you want to make like a Bitcoin mining rig or something like that, or like a server there, you'd probably you can use that same JavaScript to kind of handle that. And it handles things like database queries and file input output requests. So like what I mean by that is you can kind of read a file, you can kind of write to a file. All of these requests are kind of powered by Node.js. Back in the day, you couldn't really do these things. So, like if you try to, like write to a file with JavaScript front end, like you'd run into a lot of issues with that. While, use Node.js, bam, you Gucci. Again, so basically we kind of talked about this, like that is what Node.js is, but let's kind of talk about the whole event-driven, non-blocking input output models stuff. So what does it mean by event-driven? Basically, let's kind of go back to that analogy of like, ordering that burger from Shake Shack. You get your little flag to kind of, or your little pole with a number kind of telling you what your place is in line. This whole concept of event driven, like behaviors are very similar to that, where basically you get your little event mitter there, and then basically, like that bell at a restaurant where a cook will actually tap that and say like, hey, your mushroom burger is ready, order up. Like that's kind of the equivalent of like basically, you having the event emitter, that kind of like signaling to the emitter to kind of do something, and you basically being able to like utilize like these events driven pieces in your program. So event driven programming is like this paradigm of Node.js. It kind of resolves around like these event triggers by actions or occurrences. Like basically it's waiting for something, you give it something. These events are defined and handled by like using these event emitter classes. So for example, like next slide, show content, stuff like that you're kind of familiar with like events from the browser you can kind of do here. And you have these handlers that can kind of like basically that are executed when these events are admitted. It's kind of like the equivalent of like you getting your burger when like, someone like give delivers the burger, hits the button, hits that little bell ding to be like order up, and you enjoy a heavily overpriced burger. So why do we do this? It's like this whole event driven piece there. Like it enables building like scalable and efficient apps. So you can kind of start scaling up your app from, like 3 people to 100,000 people. And it promotes kind of like this concept of modularity and kind of decoupling, which basically just makes things a lot easier for you. Of course, it also provides this whole responsive and asynchronous behavior that we all expect on the web. It goes from basically not, blocking over here, where you have the most inefficient kind of file upload system, to kind of like being able to upload your file and go and enjoy life while that's being uploaded instead of just nursing your computer. All right, so again, Node recognizes these events, sends actions for processing. It kind of like creates callbacks to handle these actions after processing. So, when you really think about that whole burger analogy again, like you basically ringing the bell and like being like order up is kind of like your callbacks there. And, callbacks are that's the way that you kind of handle these next events and stuff like that, and inside of Node.js. So, example is you basically have like you run open file, like the fs file read, which I think we had here. This was kind of little an example where we were trying to get rich or die trying out here, where we're getting lucky numbers. This is an example of us kind of like reading to a file over here. And, again, we're not able to really like write to it. What we're doing here is we're just reading the file, getting a number, and hoping to God that we pick the right number to like get the right bookie to get the right horse and make $1 million. But yeah, like basically, as you can remember, this is kind of like a callback. This function is a callback, and then you kind of go into another callback, so on and so forth. Um, yeah, like basically the whole opening of the file is one callback. You appending the date is another, and then you close the file. It's another. Like you can kind of do this right to your file, right to a whole file on your computer using Node. Okay, so again, non-blocking operations are known as asynchronous operations. We remember this from our lab, unless we were too busy laughing at like Jackie's photos over there. But basically, um yeah, like this is kind of the reason why I taught y'all about like promises and callbacks and JSON, which is how you'll receive that data, all the way to like the APIs that you'll be building out, kind of stuff, like before we went into Node, because that's what all of this is kind of powered by. All of this is built on top of that. So like again, Node.js allows other computers to execute while you're waiting for your async function. So here's the we always kind of talk about this, how like JavaScript is like single threaded and all that stuff, and we have the whole concept of the event loop that kind of makes it, it kind of makes it feel like instead of having a ton of different processes, you have just a really great organized like person that's like taking one request, and then basically while that's spinning something else happens, while that's spinning something else happens. Um I know I was making a burger analogy a lot, but like it's kind of like, it's like having one really great barista that can kind of like take a bunch of people's orders, like take one order, pour coffee in, take another person's order, go and get the hot cocoa ready for that person, and so on and so forth. And when that first coffee's ready, just kind of giving it to the right person, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of like the power of Node. Instead of having multiple like different programs kind of like running through and stifling your process there, it kind of understands how to like organize its time and just provide stuff in this async way. Okay, so blocking operations, sometimes referred to as synchronous programming. This is kind of the idea of doing a program from one line and then go to the next line, go to the next line. It's kind of like you have three lines where you console log something. Basically, console log first line, one, console log second line, two, console log third line, three. No other code can really execute until that synchronous operation completes, the operation is slow, it can kind of cause delays in your program's execution. So that kind of sucks, you don't want to kind of, like, I don't know if we remember this whole analogy over here where, like picture if we're out here trying to get something from Best Buy and we're just waiting forever because like, these guys don't know how to optimize their website over here, instead, you do something more async like Amazon where everything loads perfectly at the right time. Event loops and single threads. So, single thread is that kind of concept of like doing one thing at a time. Event loops, we kind of talked about there, but like, a thread, like a thread is a single computer process. You do that console log, that's one single process. You do another console log, that's another, so on and so forth. Node.js's main event loop runs in single thread. So, what's kind of cool about this is like, even though like Node.js and JavaScript, all of them, they really are single thread. They just kind of understand how to be able to use events and callbacks to kind of queue orders when they get received. So it feels like this dynamic thing where like three different processes are happening at the same time. It's really single threaded just with this concept of these loops. So um, okay, cool. Yeah, so Node.js handling our web requests, like these web requests can be received by Node.js. So like, again, as I mentioned, you can build a whole API with this, and the idea is like an API is what really just you receiving. It's a application computer interface where it's basically like you're receiving and posting data to this API, and basically that's kind of like what's happening here. Like like you can kind of make this request, receive it by Node, like Node executes a handler for that request. Then like the handler initiates a database query with a callback. You're updating your Facebook or your Instagram posts out here. And that's kind of like you can kind of do all of this with the traditional JavaScript callback and promise notes that you kind of like already done. All right, so also like, JavaScript is free to handle other requests, while all of those queries are happening. So, again, you order your burger and then you can kind of sit and chill on your phone instead of just waiting and nursing at the front counter, just hoping that like you receive the right order or something like that. Um, so yeah, like basically, like while you wait to query that for that query to be complete, you can kind of just like do whatever. When like the database query ends, like Node.js will like basically notify like and like through that event, like Bing, it hits the bell for your like your order is up, and then Node.js adds a callback to the queue, basically saying like, all right, this is done. That Node.js like handler after processing like any of those events before and after the queue. So basically, while you're just sitting and doing all those, while you're waiting this query, you're waiting your burger, like you can kind of like make more requests or you can do other things on with like what your app. And honestly, that's basically why I explained why I use Node.js, but why do we use Node.js? Again, you now can, with the power of what you learned from like the front end development stuff that we've done, you can now write both client side and server side code in the same language, JavaScript. It really just simplifies development and improves code reusability. Um, Again, I'll kind of talk about this a little bit, especially with the Node package manager stuff. But at the end of the day, if you're able to, if you are, if you basically wrote a solution to something, hell, maybe the solution is something you did on the client side, you can kind of take a lot of like that implementation and like write it on the server side to solve something similar for like your back end services. Like, let's say you were kind of like moving data around on a chart in the front end, you can kind of like take a lot of that same code, change some pieces around, for your server side um, tasks. So, this whole concept of code reusability uh helps you, but also like it expands to like helping the world as well. So like there's a lot of other people that basically have built out solutions to things that they found very, very frustrating, or they found ways to improve their processes, and they've also kind of shared those on the internet. And you can kind of take that same code and put it into your app, so you can now kind of um like simplify your development by not having to reinvent the wheel, but also like improve like your code reuse. Like basically you're able to reuse someone else's code to like help speed up your development, which is awesome. you know Asynchronous and non-blocking, that's one of the reasons why we use Node. It handles these concurrent connections efficiently and allowing for like this better scalable responsive app. So you can make one request and you can basically do other things while it happens. It's not Best Buy out here where you're still waiting to see if you can load anything, man. Yo, it's the Memorial Day sale too. Like it's crazy. Like, bro, like load your page, man. So like, yeah, now you're finally here. Also, fast and efficient, built on this V8 engine over here, like the same engine that, like Google used to build their browser, which means it's like a very powerful engine. And, basically, it delivers that high performance, event driven, non-blocking input output model structure for efficient execution. So, again, you're using all of these amazing tools that like was built out by um, a team of really smarter than any of us kind of developers. And basically, you can just incorporate that into your app and make your app as awesome as possible. And that kind of goes into number four, where there's this rich ecosystem of package managers. Literally thousands of open source libraries are just sitting on npm node package manager, and this kind of helps you to be able to incorporate quick integration and functionality into your app. So basically, you need a particular way to add a feature to your app. There's probably a Node package manager out there that basically someone that made that and like allows you to kind of like just take in their code and basically reference it to actually achieve your goals. When you really think about it as well, like React is a Node package that you just install, and then you can kind of run React on your app. Basically, this is the same with if you remember Axios, where it was like that white glove delivery service for your fetch requests. Granted, this kind of goes into one of the bad sides of like having all these really great like thousands of open source libraries out there. Some of them may actually have like vulnerabilities in them, so you have to be mindful of like incorporating any and every package. But basically you're like a kid in a candy store, just being able to like grab these things that can kind of make your app better. Again, community support, active development. Here's the funny thing, like Node.js back in the day, like they made it and like they kind of just like stopped really updating it for a while, and then someone came up with like the next version of Node.js was supposed to be a Node.js killer because like they're just getting sick of how long it was taking for like Node to be constantly updated. And then from that, uh then the community basically started updating Node pretty actively. So, like what's kind of cool now is like you can benefit from that by just kind of like enjoying the community support and the active development from Node, and basically from React and all of the other popular frameworks that are currently out there. And of course, say this a lot, but this thing runs on Windows, it runs on Max OS, it runs on Linux. You can basically make different applications with different operating systems just straight up with JavaScript. So here's the deal about that. I don't know if Luis is here, but like basically uh like at his startup, he was kind of working with React Native to build out like an app, like the app for the company that he's working on. And basically he basically had to they had to build out like an Android and iOS app. So the first kind of idea was to kind of, hey, let's build it in React Native so we have like one code base, and then like like write once and just kind of like update that thing. But there are some pieces of React Native that kind of don't really talk to like the core part of like your iOS app, your Android app. It's usually iOS. It's like Android, they're usually an open book. But the idea is like, sometimes you'd actually need to build something so granular or so like low level to the iOS like kind of like, like operating system that a tool like this may not fully achieve all of your needs. But this basically covers like 80% of like what users, developers would be really needing to do with apps, whether it be desktop, whether it be Android, iOS, or the web. So it's kind of like for, if you're not building anything like crazy complex, you can technically use JavaScript to build this out on any device here, with limitations. That's all kind of powered with Node. So installing Node, I will kind of go over this really quickly, but for those who did not install Node back in the day, shame on y'all. But the idea is like we'll help you with it if there is one person out there that didn't install Node. But on Saturday we'll help you. But basically, you normally just go to the Node.js site, you click on the latest version of it, get your node. And what's kind of cool is if you are on Mac, you can kind of just like npm install it, or you can brew install it with Homebrew. So with Windows, you install it kind of from the site. Make sure you get the latest, the LTS latest, which basically means long-term support. You kind of follow the installer prompts if you're on Windows, but if you're on Mac, I would seriously recommend y'all just kind of like use basically go to Google and be like, yo, how do you brew install Noda node? That's pretty easy. Bam, brew install node. Bam. You needed to update it, brew update, then you brew install node. You can check your node versions, node-v there. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I won't go into this, but there's also like MVM, which is Node Version Manager, and that kind of gives you the ability to, let's say you need to install different versions of Node, and let's say you're building out, you are a senior software engineer now, so you've had 10 years of experience of building out Node apps. Some of your Node apps are going to be locked to older versions, so you kind of want to have different versions of Node to handle that. Upgrading to a higher version of Node on that older app might break a bunch of things, so y'all are kind of locked to a certain version of Node. You don't have to kind of uninstall the version of Node you have and then reinstall the older version, you have this ability with MVM, which I'll just kind of here show you, to actually like handle different versions. So VM is yeah. So wait, this will be better. Oh, this is it, but like this is the repo. But let me actually go to actual site here. But yeah, you can kind of like control your nodes this way. You can basically be like, yo, MVM use 18, MVM use 19, and then basically when you're working on your latest projects and you do this safely without basically having to like break your whole environment. Um, yeah, so basic commands, we basically have like this whole interactive shell with Node when you have it. Basically, let me just kind of show you here. Let me get out of let me not break my website out here. So I'll just open this up. Yeah, so basically, you just start with Node and then bam, you now have your little Node shell here where you can do a bunch of stuff like so let's H all and you can basically like console. And that's cool. You get like like kind of like a little bit of help here, almost like assistant, code assist here, but like bam, console log dork here. Um, I don't really use this a lot. This is kind of like this, like you can just equate to JavaScript here, but like I primarily just use this sometimes to like for my calculator. Sometimes I'll just be like, be cool, like kind of like just utilize this, be like, then you just kind of quit it with Control C twice to exit. But yeah, like basically you can kind of run around with that and use that. So like let's say if we have something like a file here, like let's kind of go into no, I have TTPR somewhere here. Nope, it's not Studio. That is a card. Yeah, I'm so like it's kind of annoying how unorganized I am, man. I swear I'm like a digital code hoarder over here. Too many projects running at the same time. Okay, so let's go to JS class here. I'm gonna just kind of make a directory called node. And then cd into node. And let's just kind of like start with like make directory lesson one. Cd into that. And then inside of here, I want to touch, which is basically like create a file. And I'll just say like, main JS. And now we can kind of open this up on Visual Studio Code here. And if we were to kind of like take a look at this here, let's close our little window here. But yeah, we have our little main JS here. Let's do like console dot log. Say console. Console. No, add a little bit of make that a little easier for y'all to say. See, console.log your. We kind of take a look at this now on our lesson one here and type in node um, main.js. Your, we have our little log there. So, what's kind of cool about this is, you can do stuff like navigate through your computer. You can kind of read files. You can organize your files. So as I kind of talked about, it's my folder structure is really annoying. I can actually make a Node app that kind of like moves my folders around in and organizes them in the right way, um, all via JavaScript. So cool stuff. So, execute. You can execute Node with that. You can kind of see your version, of course. We we are all we all know how to do this. Dash V. This is kind of how we confirmed that we had Node on our machines there. But yeah, where we at? Move. So, let's do something like hello node, do an output to our terminal here. We have done something similar to this. This is going to be part of your labs on Saturday, but let's say we want to say hello node JS. You can see. Um, Here's a cool bit about this. We are using the same kind of like stuff that we would use in JavaScript land to basically just log to a terminal as if we are building out backend services here. Sorry, let me just clear this so it's a little easier for y'all to see. But like I'm gonna run node main.js, hit this, and then we got this whole console log of hello node.js. Pretty cool. Here's the interesting thing, um, like from JavaScript land, you kind of probably remember this whole concept of, when we want to like log to something here, we do this thing called basically like window, and window gives us access to basically our whole window here. So if we want to do something like window dot alert, we can basically run this command that basically gives us the global context of our like window to our browser to say yurt, and that basically will give us a little alert on our window that kind of has the contents of basically what we just said there. Again, we don't necessarily have a window inside of Node, so if we do something like that here, actually, hold on, this is a good use case for actually using this whole silly like editor window here. So if we do something like window, hey, what's a window here? It's gonna be like, yo, what the hell's a window? I don't know what's a window. That's something that's really exclusive to your client side like browser. But if you do something like global, which is its equivalent, you can kind of do something like that where it shares like, oh, this is the global context of like basically um like my node window over here. So I say that to say this. Basically, you can write the same JavaScript. You can write the same like like JavaScript there. So like basically you got your hello, you got your console logs, you got your other like stuff that is kind of like similar to like using JavaScript on the client side, but there are some different parts that like are basically server side based and only server side based, and there's some things that are client side based and only client side based. So you're writing the same JavaScript, but there sometimes you have to access things slightly differently. So it's gonna be a very, very easy assignment for y'all to do because I just showed y'all how to do it on Saturday. Right. I'm like not even this thing doesn't even know where I am. Come on. All right, there we are. Cool. All right. All right, so let's talk about node modules. So node modules kind of encapsulates like related code. into a single unit of code. So you can basically utilize that in your site's functionality or your app's functionality. So again, if you this is kind of what if we take a look at, like our React apps back in the day, or actually, yeah, we'll go into that later. But React app, React. Here we go. So, remember this whole little React app where we kind of was like hello world, we kind of added numbers to there to kind of like so I can show y'all how like your an app runs here. Let me quickly see if I can just run this for y'all, just so y'all forgot. I know finals is a thing, but I can kind of remind y'all what we did here. PM run dev. Wake up. Wake up. Oh man. All right. There we go. Yeah, we have this whole little concept of like hello world Hess. We've added a number here. This is kind of like this little basic app that we made just to kind of like play around with React JS. But what's interesting is if you go into this whole thing over here, it's called package.json, you'll kind of see a lot of like a lot of crap here, honestly. And it's just like it looks intimidating. It's really weird, but like um I didn't want to share this with y'all until y'all kind of like understood more things, but now's the time. So if we look at line 12 here, we see this concept of dependencies. One of the dependencies is React, the other dependency is React DOM. This is an example of like a encapsulated like piece of code that basically we can utilize somewhere else. Like so basically the whole React community built React up to React 19 out here. And now we can kind of take that dependency, we can take that node package and put it into our dependencies to actually like run React on our app. As well as, we actually have other dev dependencies that we can kind of use that are also kind of these little node modules. So basically, all of these here are certain version numbers, and we can kind of like utilize them for our app, the development of our app. While these guys are basically what's absolutely necessary for deployment. All node modules. So that's kind of like so we've been playing around with node modules for a little bit, but creating a module, it all kind of like boils down to what we're going to do here, where basically creating a module can kind of like interpreted as like moving all of like our related functions into kind of like one file, like moving all of your code to make a React app, into like, moving the core libraries of like what makes a React app into your little module called React there. So yeah, benefits of kind of like these modules is we have this code organization and code reusability, so like you organize code into separate modules for better organizations. So basically you can reuse these modules, but also you can kind of debug these modules a whole lot easier too. So you're like, hey, this one module is acting up. I know that one module is like, um, add addition module, and basically I can kind of debug why 2 plus 2 is 7 on in that compared to like 2 plus 2 is 4. And like you get to reuse it. Like we all get to utilize the magic of React now, because all of what makes React on the web is kind of abstracted to React and React DOM, as we are using the DOM for interacting with our React app. So basically, let's say if we were using React Native, we'd probably get rid of this and do React Native. And basically, from there, we can kind of utilize like the same code that was kind of built out, and like put that into our app. Uh, Another kind of benefit is like this whole encapsulation and information like hiding. So it kind of encapsulates functionality and only exposes the necessary elements to enhance the code's modularity. So the idea behind that is you don't really need to see a lot of the working inner pieces, but it'll only expose pieces that you really like that you really interact with. So like a long story short, like let's say that whole addition module I was joking about before, you don't really need to know how it works unless something's broken, but you just need to know you have to pass in like two numbers and then it would add those numbers together and you just kind of focus on that piece and not have to worry about like the other like moving pieces in there. For example, like file reading, like you don't necessarily need to kind of understand how like that whole file reading's happening, but you kind of want to make sure that you understand that all right, all I need to do is have a path to the file that I want my program to read. So I know I have to do that. I know that's something that you expose to basically share, like, all right, like this function requires a path to your file or something like that. Okay, so encapsulation, information hiding. That's one of the benefits there. Dependency management. We have like this whole easily managed project with dependencies, like using tools like npm, ensuring there's a consistent, reliable integration from like your external libraries. This is an example of what I just shared. So, we have these dependencies here, and what's kind of cool about it is the dependencies kind of lock to certain versions. So you kind of are able to like make sure you replicate the same experience um, on all browsers. So let's say y'all are all working together and someone pushes up their repo to GitHub, and then your your teammates from your capstone project pulls them down. What's kind of cool about that is at that point you can then basically like and run npm install, which goes out, grabs the packages that are kind of in this package JSON, sharing like what are the dependencies, what are the dev dependencies, and then you get the same experience as the person that started the repo that basically was like, yo, you really got to check out this 2+2 and hello world Hess over here. Okay, so a cool way of like kind of thinking about this is like, when you get a cake recipe, you're not gonna like the recipe is gonna give you the instructions on how to make that cake. It's not gonna give you like the flour, the eggs, all these things there. Like what you do is you go out, you understand for this cake you need 3 eggs, for this cake you need, like with the 2 ounces, like 4 cups of flour and like cocoa powder or whatever. So you go and grab those. Then you, with the instructions, you go and like kind of bring this all together and turn it into the cake that was kind of instructed on there. So again, improves maintainability and testing. This modular code structure simplifies maintenance, allows you to kind of like focus on testing these small individual components, very modular like React, like we talked about. We have like performance optimization. There's this whole concept of lazy loading of modules. This kind of helps us basically reduce the initial load time on our page so we don't end up looking like bestbuy.com out here. Finally load. Look at this guy. All right. All right. But yeah, if you go and click on a video game, will freeze on you. So, all right, I'm gonna stop ragging on them. But here, you know what? Like, let this be a lesson. Maybe it's worth like being like, yo, I know how to dynamically lazy load stuff. So Best Buy, you should hire me. You're obviously falling behind. So hire me. If y'all are ever looking for a job, you basically like drop the mic by showing a page that actually loads faster than what they got in production over there. Um, yeah, so we got the lazy loading piece there. But and also you have access to like a large collection of pre-built modules through NPM, saving development time and effort. So the idea is like how much time do we have? All right, yeah, we still got time. I think we can get to node modules, but the idea is like there's a whole basically kid in a candy store type site where you can kind of just grab different like node packages that will help enhance your development and help enhance your app. And you basically can kind of like all you need to do is make sure that like the package is actually maintained pretty well and doesn't have any security vulnerabilities by like running like audits and stuff like that on it. And like you can kind of like benefit from someone else's code. And that's kind of like one of the secret paths to basically being a senior developer, understanding how to kind of easily understand and incorporate other people's code so your app is built faster, more efficiently done, and just it looks like you just kind of cranked out an app in no time when you basically are benefiting from the shoulders of giants out here. All right, so Node.js comes with these built-in modules. They're called core modules, and these are kind of like the bread and butter what Node does a lot of time. So, they're kind of like, yo, we need these core modules in here no matter what. So the first one is FS, file system. Basically, these are what holds the events, the classes, the functions for your file input output, so you can kind of read and write to files. HTTP. This has like the events and classes and functions for creating, an HTTP server. So you can kind of make requests, post requests, stuff like that. You also have your utils functions that help you assist with debugging. So you can kind of pause your program and see how things are working. You can inspect elements, and actually like deprecating like code and pieces like that. And then of course the path to kind of just work through like going through your directory, like navigating through your whole directory that way. We also have, these external modules, some are referred to as third-party modules. These are kind of created by other developers and publicly available. So you can kind of go in like download someone else's work and basically add that to your site and make things a whole lot faster and easier. This can save developers a lot of time and effort. So here's the deal, um, like I'm sure y'all are all blown away by the stuff from Three.js here, but like the reason why all of these things can be so amazing and like so like like visually and computationally impressive and run on a browser like this, so you can see the whole solar system out here and go to the sun. Blah, my eyes. But go and check out the Artemis mission over here. Um, but this is all powered by a third-party open source library called Three.js. So instead of really understanding how to deal with like how to make 3D things work on your browser, like this library kind of solves it all, and you just have to kind of like read the documentation and then you can start building it out yourself. Like, all right, let's check this out. Oh, this is how I use animation actions in here. So I can actually animate my player. This is kind of how I can use audio to actually play around with audio here and stuff like that. So yeah. All right, it's 8 o'clock. I want to make sure we kind of get through as much as we can. So go a little faster here. Yeah, so custom modules. So here's the deal. We got these like other modules out here. You now know you've been using modules. You can incorporate new modules into your projects. But you can also create modules yourselves. And you've kind of been doing this already with React. But let me just kind of show you how this is kind of working. So um, custom modules are usually like specific to like developer's application. It can be as simple as like a greeting module here. So let's, as you can see in module JS over here, we have like this whole module JS that basically says console.log hello class. And then our app.js, we require that. And then basically this would actually run this whole like module JS, and then you can like run like, that whole console log hello class there. Um, I'll try to do it when I like if I do this, then we basically won't have time to finish the lectures. So let me try to finish through our lectures, and then we can kind of play around with this. Um, but yeah, like basically you can have this whole external module here, and then you basically a whole app here, and then from there you can kind of like utilize this, and you keep these things very small, so you have your own kind of like thing that you're including and excluding there. So let me just kind of show you an example of how this is working in a more like in modern time. So require JS, like using this whole require thing here, is basically the equivalent of us in React land here. So basically, if you take a look, in our package.json, we're actually like, we're using this whole concept of a type module here. And I'll go into this a little bit more. But like TLDR, this is kind of like telling us in our package JSON, like we can use modules in a different way. And the way we can use that is through this whole import system here. So in theory, we've been kind of like importing modules into other modules already using like when we were playing around with React here. So this whole app.js here, if you see, we've kind of like export the export default this whole app here. And then inside of our main.jsx, we actually import our app as if it's almost like what we did here, where we're requiring module.js, which is doing all of the stuff here. And basically from there, we import it. And, we just kind of represent this as JSX here. So we are representing our component this way, where we're just saying like, all right, on the root directory, like sorry, on our root like document get element by ID, we have our root here. Right here, replace this and put our whole app.js here in strict mode. Basically, we are importing it. We're importing this component. It's kind of like you can think of like components and modules basically as the same thing. You can think of almost this as like being like, all right, require app, and now we use app this way. But basically we're taking this and we're presenting it in a whole nother file. So we built out all the logic that we needed in app.js here at JSX here. We exported it out here, and now we can import it anywhere we need to, so technically, what's cool about this is, again, this is super encapsulated, so you can kind of do it twice. So, basically, this might break the app, but let's take a look here, see what happens. Run this twice, we basically have two apps running because again, they're modular and they're modular little pieces there, and you can kind of see basically we got two renditions of the same component here. That's how easily modular and composable like um, our our modules, and to an extent our components are when we're building these things out in these kind of like little puzzle block pieces here. So that's kind of like the TLDR of that. Module loaders, like as you saw, we are using require JS and JavaScript to kind of load our modules in. So, as you see here, we have require JS here, kind of load those pieces in. We actually even have it in, we've been using this for our testing suite when we're actually testing you guys with your labs. So let me just quickly grab an example here. You take a look at, if y'all finish the DOM lab, you can kind of see that um, inside of our test folder here, where, like if you take a look at our package JSON here, we're using this dependency of Jest here, which is a testing framework that helps us kind of like run tests for our labs. And from that, we've actually basically we needed FS for that. So we actually imported the module of FS. We've imported the module of path. We required it, FS, require path. And then from that, we can kind of take this, which now equates to like this module here, and we can kind of run the logic that we need on it. So for example, here for path, this basically gave me the path of like the HTML document. So like I called path dot join based off of like the directory name. So where we currently are, I was like, yo, leave the directory. So dot dot, get out of this directory, find the index.html. So let's say we are in test folder here. We were currently running from this file here. We left it, and then we went to find index.html here. Then I get to check to see if y'all like actually wrote down the HTML elements like I wanted y'all to do. The same thing here, as you can see, when I run this function called load lab, I'm actually using FS, which is like the file system manager piece. And I can then start reading the HTML from that path that I created here. So I kind of understand the path of where the HTML is, understand the path of where our script.js is, and then I can start reading them by basically running this whole module here of FS, and then I could start testing y'all on whether you wrote down like the correct code and stuff like that. So at the end, all of these things that we've been doing, like kind of are built upon like all of the stuff that I'm teaching here. So if you're ever curious, go and take a look at some of the test suites that we've like created for y'all, so you can kind of see how we're actually like able to kind of see whether did the you did the right thing on your labs. All right, wait, let's go back to ESPs here. Okay, so yeah, that's an example of required JS. It uses like modular script loading like that to kind of improve the speed and quality of your code. Again, in a lot of older repos, because, again, you will more than likely be dealing with older code bases along with newer code bases. Like people will use require JS like I did here. But others would actually use something closer to the import process that we saw with React.js here. So, I actually kind of like imported our component this way. You can also import modules the same way. Again, they're very similar. You can but this is kind of like the newer way of handling it. So remember, if you kind of see require and import, you can kind of think of them almost synonymously. Okay, so require is that function that points to a path, so you can kind of like grab that current module, and like basically then you can kind of like traverse it and like utilize that module the way that we like either like we used it here. So basically I can now use this module as this little variable here and kind of do whatever I want with it. Um, very much like the component you saw, I can, nope, that's angry H out here. But I can import my app this way. So I can kind of I'm basically taking the path of it, and then I can kind of utilize what I wrote in that component there. It's kind of like this whole same module piece there. So you're more than likely going to be like importing and requiring, these third party or like native libraries that are already in Node.js. But also remember, when you're doing your own modules, like you make custom modules yourself, this is kind of the same structure as you would do with basically grabbing your external module like you did with your components and putting it wherever you needed to put it in your page or in your application. It's not really a page anymore because you're building backend services now with your JavaScript. So again, this is kind of how we would do it. As you saw, this supports this whole relative path as well as like an absolute path. So, this is kind of exactly what happened here. You got this guy over here. What's cool is like, I can kind of like import FS this way because it's kind of like this. We already know this is going to be kind of within Node already. So you don't really have to necessarily like go and find it that way, but like you can actually do this with your custom modules as well as if you needed like an absolute path somewhere, you can kind of like go and grab it from like the web and stuff like that. And then when you export your module, like this is very similar to what we did here with our React app, where basically in our app.js, we have this whole concept of like, all right, we did all the stuff we wanted to do with our app here. And we have our hello name. It took in a variable, it presented it as like, JSX. We actually did some math equations here. All right, we're done. Let's export this. So like it's ready to be shipped. This is kind of like putting it in like a little package so it can kind of be put like shipped anywhere. So you export it, and now that it's exported, I can kind of like import it to any other place. And this is very similar to our node module setup here, where basically we have inside of our module 1.js here, we have this whole like export foo, which basically is a variable that equals a string. And then in our app 1.js, we can kind of require that module one as a variable and then call dot foo on it. Dot foo is basically going to point to the string here. And then if we had a whole second module, we can basically export that module to basically see module.export, hello. And then if we import that module in there, bam, like variable B will equal that export, which is just a string there. So you can actually export uh, things like different ways. Export a whole object, so you can kind of call dot bar on it, like sorry, dot foo, which would equal bar, while you can kind of also just export like the actual value that you want, and then from there, when you require it, you basically just need to present the variable that it was saved to, and it will just give you the output, which is hello, uh, from like that module there. So different ways to, long story short, this is basically saying there's different ways to export modules. There's um sometimes when you're like the TLDR of this is sometimes when you're trying to like figure out like why this module is not importing properly, just kind of like check the structure of how you exported the modules. Cause like when you think about it, it's almost like basically being blind and then basically trying to open up a package. If you put like an extra slide of tape on it, like I basically, my thought process is like, oh, I just need to peel off this tape once and then I should be able to open it and get the values of it. While basically the other package had like double strap tape, and then the way you open the box is through like how like if you're looking at my cam, I can show you the camera here. Basically, some boxes open up like this way over here, kind of like with this little talking flap, while others are kind of like normal boxes that you open and stuff like that. And like, that's the way you can change your whole like things can be imported and exported differently. So like kind of like think about that as you are exporting your modules. Okay, so here's a simple example here. We have this whole function of hello world, you know, and this is callable via require or via importing it if you're doing it the more modern way. Again, I'm teaching you both because you'll be dealing with older code bases, you'll be dealing with newer code bases. You should know both because they're basically synonymous, and you don't want to just be like, I don't know how to do this. It's like, little did you know, you already knew how to do this. It's like the whole Mr. Miyagi Karate Kid thing. You were waxing on and waxing off the whole time. So basically this whole concept of hello world, you return this string hello world here, and then export hello world like in this method directly. You just do this module dot export hello world, and then basically you're just exporting this whole function here. So an export can be a single function, it can be the whole component, like it was a whole React component. Hello world function is defined that way. And then when you like utilize this in another JS file, you just basically your module export will just point to this function that you have here. It's a little weird sometimes, but I just like, this is how things are wrapped together in like node packages and stuff like that. So the sooner you know this, the better you would be with node package managers and stuff like that. So again, let's go through basically handling two different functions here. So let's say we had this whole concept of a hello world, then a hello person. As you can see, this person takes an actual parameter called name. So it actually says hello variable name. You can kind of wrap those objects and export them like an object here. So you basically have this module export that holds hello world, which is just presenting the string hello world, but also hello person, which is basically going to present something else, but it needs to take in another kind of parameter here. So how would we do that is, if you take a look at this like same situation here, basically let's take a look at how this is kind of rocking here. We actually now added another variable called extra information. So we're just like tacking things on over here, but it still has our same function of hello world. It still has our same function of hello person where it takes in a parameter of name. But this time around, inside of hello person, you can see it now says, we're going to return hello, the name that we pass in, but also the variable called extra information we're also going to add into this whole hello person thing. So how are we going to do this? If you take a look at the right after the function hello person, you'll see that basically the module then exports this whole thing into a function that holds, like, that takes in a parameter called info. It basically turns that whole extra information, it basically assigns that to info. So like basically whatever that parameter of info that we pass in is basically is going to become extra information. And then we return hello world and hello person kind of the same way as we did here. But it's not in this object structure. We kind of wrap it in a function now. So if we kind of take a look at the bottom two code lines here, we're actually still requiring our module like the same way, like my module, which is basically everything that we have up to here so far. And what we also have is this extra parameter called it's a beautiful day. And that's basically our parameter of this info that we are like basically passing in here. So basically my module, the variable here now becomes basically the function of like these two parameters being called, but we also have this like it's a beautiful day kind of wrapped into this module extra information parameter here. So when we print out something like my module dot hello person and like we pass in the name Sally here, what's gonna happen is basically, it's gonna run um hello, Sally, it's a beautiful day. Because we already passed in it's a beautiful day when we required this module for extra information. So that's kind of already tied into my module here. And then when we call my module and call that function hello person, which is already returned inside of this module export, basically with the parameter of this name, Sally, we actually then print out what we are going to print out in hello person, which is return hello parameter name, which is name there, but also we're returning the other like variable that we have at the top of our module called extra information, which we already assigned. It's a beautiful day. We can pass things around. It can be a little weird and confusing, but I think one of the things I want to point out is like once you start playing around with it and get your hands dirty, it will make a little bit more sense. So that's part of the reason why y'all are gonna have at least 3 labs on Saturday to kind of play around with this a little bit more. So npm install required JS into your folder if you want to use it. Again, you can also use import, but these are kind of like the ways you install these libraries in. So this is a node package. So this is another kind of like external like piece of code that you put into your code base to make things easier for yourself. So we'll kind of go into this a little later. Like this is actually another like thing I want y'all to do, but here's kind of like the TLDR what you're gonna do. Like you have this whole set difference JS. Your objective is to set the difference given two arrays of strings. You're gonna produce a single string from the items that are in there. And then like you have this whole set intersection given two arrays. You're gonna basically gonna produce a single array with a unique items that are in both arrays. So basically, what these are gonna do is like they're basically you're gonna like import, you're gonna create two modules from these, and then basically you're gonna import them in. And then based off of this kind of like set of arrays that I'll give you, I want you all to basically use your modules that you've created to actually basically create the difference and create the intersection and console log them out. So again, that'll be our lab for Saturday. These were going to be 3 labs that we're going to do Saturday, and then there's also another smaller one that I already made. But like y'all will be doing this together in groups, so I want y'all to kind of like I guess prepare, there'll be more work than just sitting around and chilling in the heat out here. So yeah, keep that in mind. Um it is 8:24, so we're not going to go into node modules. Well, I'll kind of give y'all the TLDR of that on Saturday. Um y'all work together on kind of dealing with Node.js and how to play around with it more in class in your groups that you are doing your capstones with. And then the remainder of the class, y'all will just be working on your capstones. Um, Sounds good? All right. So before we end, I guess one of my questions is how are y'all feeling about your capstones? Do you have any kind of cries of outrage? Are you excited? Are you do you have summeritis so you're just over here just ready to like just have summer start? Are you pissed that you don't get a 3-day weekend because technically we're gonna be teaching class on Saturday? How are y'all doing? Bueno, cool. But here's the deal. Again, like something I want to point out is y'all are going to be able to like utilize a lot of these existing libraries. You're going to be able to use a lot of existing um front end libraries. So like a lot of what I want y'all to kind of really think about is if these core pieces are really kind of taken care of for you, and like one of the biggest things that you have to do is really just learn how to like read documentation and take these into your project. What are the tough problems that you're really trying to solve in your capstone app, when a lot of these are kind of, like slipped away, so like keep that in mind. But on that note, um we'll end early. Thank you guys for listening for a whole 2 hours out here. But yeah, yeah. If you don't have any questions, get out of here.
Yeah, Professor, do we have a class on this Saturday?
Yeah, we do, unfortunately.
Okay, no. Now I have a morning class, so it is suspended, miss. They
Oh yeah,
don't have.
yeah. So people do have classes on Saturdays anyway.
I
So
have, so it's canceled.
oh, it is canceled. So that's the
Yeah.
crazy thing. It's not canceled for us, Like so here, I actually like here. Let's quickly like look at this message from Geraldino over here to make sure that we're all not tripping out here. But basically, yeah, the college is open on Saturdays. But the weird thing is, as you can see, Saturday it says
No
no
class.
classes,
Yes.
but it says, but like it says no classes. You still have boot camp though. So basically,
Oh,
like the college is open. Um, I will make sure that the doors are open, hopefully, and basically from that we'll be able to kind of like utilize the campus there. If that's not the case, I guess party at Starbucks. I don't even know, man. But we'll figure it out.
I'll see you on Saturday, sir.
I'll see y'all on Saturday. Cool, cool.
Good night, everyone. Game safe.
Good night.
Oh, wait, we're already
You
home,
too,
right?
Professor. Bye bye.
Yeah, whoever's not home, get home safe.
Yeah, it's usually Lewis, right?
Yeah, I know. Like, Lewis is working hard out here. Yeah. All right, take it easy, guys.
Good night.
Peace.